Hello, everyone. Welcome to Educational Norms. Today we have a repeat guest, Mr. Erik Francis, who is out in New Mexico, I believe, right? Correct? I always want to say
Arizona,
Arizona.
actually.
See, I was wrong. Arizona. Erik Francis is an international author, educator, presenter, professional development producer, and provider of over 30 years of expertise in education. Erik's an author of three different books, and from our conversation, I know there's another one coming, but he's written Inquiring Minds Want to Learn, posing good questions that promote student inquiry, Deconstructing Depth of Knowledge, a method and model for deeper teaching and learning, and the latest one that's out now, that's a good question, how to promote cognitive rigor through classroom questioning, which has become a very interesting topic that I've been working on quite a bit and using your resources. So thank you. And also, just recently, he was
Thank you.
listed, yeah, just recently, he was listed on the 50 best speakers for schools in the US by Jono White. So congratulations on that. And Erik is also the owner of
Thank-
Maverick Education. Man, that's a big intro, Erik.
Yeah, and I still can't get a free cup of coffee at Starbucks when I go in there. That's when
Uh,
I know I really make it. Like when I go into Starbucks and like Norm from Cheers, they go,
yes.
Eric, venti coffee, splash coconut milk, two ice cubes to cool it down. I know I made it and no cost. There you go.
Well, yeah, that unless you're a police officer, you may never get that.
Oh, well, yeah, then I guess I just have to just suffer my lot with all that thing that you just talked about me.
Just keep striving. That's all. That's a
There you
good
go.
goal to
There you
have. So, welcome back to the podcast. I really do appreciate the work you put in and all the knowledge you put out in the universe for all of us to look at and to learn from. So, today we have a very specific topic that we're going to focus on, and something that when you reached out and said this is something that is concerning, I totally agree, and I think that it's a good platform to be able to set the ship straight for a little bit. So let's the topic for those that are wondering, the topic is using AI and DOK and how that turns into, as your term, Erik, the wheel 2.0, which we'll get into here in a little bit. But
go.
before we get into the misconceptions of what these things are about, could you review with our audience what was the original intention of Webb's depth of knowledge and what has it become?
Thanks. Thanks. I appreciate giving that opportunity. Okay, so depth of knowledge, when it first came out as a concept and a framework, it was a criterion for alignment studies. What you would do is you would take your standards and you would code it based upon what's called your cognitive demand, which is not based upon the thinking, but you're trying to look at what exactly are you thinking about and how deeply do you have to think about it. That's the words and phrases that come after the verb in a standard or modify the verb. So we can have something that says analyze, but what exactly do they have to analyze and how deeply do they have to analyze it? That's depth of knowledge. So what people originally would do is, and this is the original intent of it, was that you would take a standard and you would code it a one, two, three, or four. And then you would take an activity or an assessment item and you would code it a one, two, three, or four. And then you would see how closely they address each other, how aligned they are. Then it became more of a measure of cognitive rigor. So, what exactly is the level of thinking students must demonstrate according to Bloom's taxonomy or another cognitive framework, and how deeply the students have to understand and use their learning in a certain context? That's depth of knowledge. So, it's not another cognitive framework. We have enough. You have Bloom's, the revised version, you have the Solo taxonomy, you have Marzano's taxonomy. There's a new one that's emerging called Fink's taxonomy of significant learning. Taxonomies categorize the level of thinking students must demonstrate. Depth of knowledge was about the depth and extent they have to understand and use their learning. That's when I learned about depth of knowledge through my Common Core training. And that's when I was introduced to the DOK wheel, which I'm proud to say I'm one of the people that refuted it and said it's completely inaccurate. When I wrote my book on DOK, I just didn't want to write a book on what is depth of knowledge. That's for Norman Webb to write. I wanted to write a book on how depth of knowledge can be used as a method and model for teaching and learning. And what I do with depth of knowledge in DOK is I use it as a concept where we're basically establishing what exactly and how deeply the kids have to think about or learn what they're learning. The framework I use is I say there are four ways kids can comprehend and communicate or demonstrate their learning and discuss their learning, excuse me. Now, what I've been trying to do with it is tie it to visible learning, John Hattie's work.
Hmm.
The first premise of visible learning is being clear about the purpose. What do teachers see learning through the lens of the students? Students see learning through the lens of the teacher, or as a teacher, and teachers see themselves as students. So in my book, what I came up was what I call these DOK descriptors that specify what does learning look like, sound like, and feel like in the classroom. And how do we really know that they're learning it? We see a lot of kids who are engaged in technology and going bip, bop, boop, and swipe left and swipe right. But how do I know why they really learned it? That's also not only just tying it to visible learning,
Hmm.
but there's also a guy named Richard Feynman who I learned about who says true learning is marked and measured by your ability to comprehend and communicate what you know and understand in a way that other people can understand it. He says that's why Neil deGrasse Tyson is able to get the acceptance that he has, or Stephen Hawking, or Bill Gates, or can you communicate in a way that other people can understand it? And that's what I'm really looking at also as well, is that how can we get the kids to comprehend and communicate their learning? And that's a huge thing right now because they are being bombarded by so much information and misinformation that we need to be able to have the kids to be able to summarize and synthesize and really select the information that they're acquiring and put it in their own words and really understand what is the truth and also what are the misconceptions. So that's a lot what I'm doing. I'm trying to simplify depth of knowledge. I can't make it simple, but I can make it easier.
And I think that's the key because as an educator, we like simple things that work. And the easier to understand, the easier to put to practice, the more likely it's going to be sustained over time. So
Right.
that's exactly what we should be doing is looking how to fine tune these so it's consumable by the masses, basically, and understood properly.
Right. Well, that's why I worry about AI. Now, I'm not going to go on here and I'm not going to basically there's two camps. There's AI all the way and there's AI no way. And I am in neither camp. I am not basically going to be that person who's going to get up there and say AI is a wonderful thing, and I'm not going to go up there and say AI is ruining our lives. It really depends. It When I look at AI, as I say, it is a thought partner. It basically is something that should help you and guide you. It's not a resource, it's a tool.
Hmm.
And I think that's where I get concerned about, especially with DOK. And that's why I reached out to you because I said, Norm, we're going back into a realm where DOK is being misinterpreted again because I spent 10 years of my life. How long, I've known you for how long? And you've always known me like, hey, the DOK wheel's inaccurate. And Norm, I got to tell you, I'm the quote, Danny Glover in Lethal Weapon, and I won't say it, I'm too old to go out and basically say, no, this is not accurate,
Right.
with the vigor that I did. And I'm concerned because I see a lot of things. I see a lot of posts. I see a lot of people talking about it. And I saw the way that they're describing it. And the glass half full. I don't see people using the wheel as much anymore. I think we've kind of squashed that a little bit. And there's been enough to said about it. There's enough. Norman Webb, thank goodness, wrote something on Edutopia. I've written about it in my books. Karen's written about it in her books, and we've become kind of like the authority on it, which is I'm very proud to be considered one of them. But now what I'm seeing is these Chat GPT, Notebook LM, Claude, Gemini descriptions of what depth of knowledge is. And what I'm asking people to do is, and I question this, and I do this, I don't know if you see on social media, when I see someone talking about it, I say, what's your knowledge source? Because
Right.
they're not getting the knowledge source. And I did this with a district, they had a Gemini gem that somebody created, and it was supposedly can determine DOK levels. And I said, well, what's the knowledge source? And it cited Norman Webb's papers. Great. But you know what the link they gave me? Secondary sources for interpretations. And that's what people have to understand is that AI is not going to disseminate what's the truth and what's a misconception unless you tell it and you need to be very, very accurate in your prompts. Like when I prompt things, I say cite credible research, resources, and reports from education authors and practitioners and books and journals and white papers. Do not use Wikipedia. Do not use Reddit. Do not use Quora. And I also have to say, do not hallucinate. Have
Right.
you heard about this with the AI?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. AI hallucinates. I like to say, is like a dog. It wants to please you. The problem is that you can train the AI as much as you will, like a dog. You can train the dog to go outside to go to the bathroom, but it's going to inevitably go on your carpet or on your tile. It's going to defecate or urinate on your carpet or tile. That's the same thing with AI. And I just get really nervous when I see about this because, our kids deserve to have the most accurate and appropriate information given to them to learn. And yeah, it cuts down the work of unwrapping standards, unpacking standards, deconstructing standards, thinking about, is this a DOK 1, 2, 3, or 4? But what's the accuracy of it? I can't
Right.
just go, okay, it's that because AI says so.
Right. Well, let me take a step back because your passion is obvious with this topic, but I want to make sure the audience is clear about the wheel and what that is and how it came about. Because if we're going to call AI the wheel 2.0, I want to make sure they understand the original wheel and what that was and why it's inaccurate to make sure that we are on the same page moving into that AI understanding. So, talk to me about how those misconceptions were basically reinforced by the wheel or vice versa. I'm not sure which one came first, the chicken or the egg on that one, but it's
Well,
one of those where we need to figure that out.
it's really so here's the interesting thing is that again, DOK was used for alignment studies, and one of the first states to bring in Norman Webb for alignment studies was Florida. And Florida actually even came up with their own DOK levels for alignment studies. Like they realized that a standardized assessment, you're not going to have DOK 4 items on it because it takes too much time, it takes too much transfer, it takes too much talking, it takes even, extensive, mental processing. So they blended DOK 3 and 4 together. So Florida was one of the first states to not use Bloom's taxonomy. They used Webb's depth of knowledge. Well, some teacher uploaded this wheel to the internet and they said this is DOK. But what's interesting, and I found this out when I read Karen's one of Karen's books, was that Karen Hess, is that she said it was based on the Bloom's Hot Wheel that Dr. Barbara Clark created back in the day, back in the 80s, actually. It was a gifted book. The difference is the Bloom's Hot Wheel has 5 spokes in it, and the DOK wheel has 4. Now, when we all went Common Core, as we all know, they said the rigor of these standards are based upon the level of thinking students must demonstrate, which is categorized by a cognitive framework. They typically use Bloom's taxonomy and the depth of knowledge demanded. There was a state, I'm still going to be respectful and not say who the state is. I know who the state is. In fact, I've shown you the
Hmm.
message I got from the state about this that did a search and said, what is this depth of knowledge? Because, we need our visuals, we need our frameworks. They found this wheel on the internet. They saw it came from Florida. They knew Florida was one of the states that was using depth of knowledge for their alignment studies. So they put this wheel on a poster and said, this is DOK, and they disseminated it out with all the Common Core trading resources. And basically, they were later realized that this was an inaccurate document. And it's funny because I was presenting on it for the University of Connecticut about DOK, and I talked about the state that where this all arose out of. And if you want implications, what's the state that was behind the Common Core, most of the things, and they engaged you very well with their curriculum. Enough said. You can basically take what I'm
Right.
implying there,
Right.
and they realized their mistake and they tried to go out in the field and fix it, but it's too late. So for 10 years, we've been thinking that depth of knowledge was another way to do Bloom's, and it's not.
Mm-mm.
And that's why, Karen has come out with her books, her fantastic books. I wrote my book, not on what depth of knowledge is, but how do you understand and use it as a method model for teaching and learning. If you want to use the pure version of depth of knowledge for alignment studies, I would go talk to Webb because they have that. If you want to talk about cognitive rigor and you want to code for cognitive rigor, I would talk to Karen. If you want to know how to comprehend and communicate it as, a practical strategy in your classroom, I would welcome the opportunity to work with people on that because that's the way I kind of look at it. I look at it that, and I'm trying to say this, to go beyond the alignment and go beyond the coding. It's like, okay, so what does that learning look like, sound like, and feel like? Here are these descriptors. Now, the descriptors are very simple. Sorry, the descriptors are very succinct and easy, but they're not simple. Because if I say answer correctly, which is a DOK1, well, I got to think about that. What does that mean? If I say establish and explain with examples, well, what does that mean? I simplified the description, but that doesn't mean you just go, oh, okay, it's that because it's that. No, you really got to think about it. You got to,
Hmm.
it's not something you can just say, I got it, I'm good, let's go, because that's about the teacher. The teacher feels good. I'm at a DOK1. I'm at a DOK2. My lesson's at a DOK3. My kids are learning at DOK4. Norm, what if I told you I tell administrators that their teachers are all teaching at deeper DOK levels?
They are.
They are. Norm, think about it. You know DOK, so think about it. They're actually, so they're not up there answering correctly. That's a DOK1. What are they doing? They're establishing, explaining. They're using information and basic reasoning. They're applying their knowledge, concepts, and skills to process to provide information to teach. That's a DOK2. So that's why I say the student becomes a teacher at a DOK2. And at DOK3, when we're evaluating, when we're grading, when we are differentiating instruction, when we're thinking strategically how we can address that kid and help them, when we're using complex reasoning to say, okay, this is not getting through, what do I need to do to adjust my instruction or modify my instruction? That's a DOK3.
Hmm.
The beauty of a teacher is that they're able to get, and the gift of a teacher, of a talent, is that they're able to go and connect that standard and that curriculum to the real world and the students' interest. That's a DOK4. So flip the script. You hear Charlie Brown's teacher? She's teaching at a deeper DOK level. You watch Ben Stein give the voodoo economics lecture in Ferris Bueller. He's teaching at a deeper DOK level. That's not the question. The question is, what's the level the kids are learning at?
Right.
Because I
Right.
can get up here and right now I'm at a DOK4, but I'm not patting myself on the back because it's not about me. Your listeners are all at a DOK1. Why? Because they're listening, because they're just sitting and getting, they're acquiring the knowledge. If we turned it over to them and say, okay, so in your own words, what did Erik say? If we said, okay, now take what Erik learned and do this, that's a DOK too. If we gave them an assignment with an outcome or result already presented, and they have to justify or verify or consider and critique why is that accurate or inaccurate, that's a 3. And if they went and wrote their own book about how to understand and use depth of knowledge, or they created their own professional learning on how they use depth of knowledge, innovative and inventively, not just taking someone else's
Right.
stuff, but really doing. That's the difference with DOK is that you're not just doing someone's stuff, you're doing something innovative and inventive. That's a DOK for.
Well, it's funny you bring that up because I'm actually doing a question audit in a classroom in the near future. And one of the things that I've noticed is sometimes the teachers will ask those DOK questions in the classroom that are levels 3 and 4 and getting good conversation. And then on their assessment, they'll ask the exact same question and just have the kids regurgitate what they talked about. So I'm
Right.
wondering, you can have a high level question and still make it a very low level expectation of the student, depending on how it's presented.
Right. And see that's an interesting thing with it. But again, there's teaching for depth of knowledge, there's testing for depth of knowledge, and then there's
Hmm.
learning for depth of knowledge. So what I would even say to that teacher, and even going into the science of learning, is that how are you using your test? Are you using your test to assess whether they know it and understand it? Because that's a DOK1. Okay. Even if you're assessing whether they can explain it, that's a DOK2. But let's talk about retrieval. And there's something I just read a book called Make It Stick. and they talk about testing for retrieval, testing for learning. So when I look at tests, I would look at a test and I would suggest this. What if we use the test to teach the kids how they can retrieve what they've learned? And I think we're not focusing on it. I was walking in the classroom a couple of weeks ago and I saw a math teacher teaching, and it was rapid fire in the explanations. And even when the kids said, slow down, wait a minute, okay? Are we giving these kids enough time not only to encode what they're learning and store it, but are we giving them an experience that they can relate to store it so they can retrieve it? That's why communication is huge. I personally, you know me, Norm, I'm always trying to push the boundary of something, is that even with the science of reading, I see a lot of people talking about comprehension. I'm not seeing a lot of people talk about the communication aspect of literacy, because I can read something and I can take in something and I can understand all the ideas and the language and how it's used, but can I convey it to someone else? That's the real true learning, and that's where depth of knowledge can come in and help.
Well, and that ties in with the writing piece that is often hand in hand, but they don't teach them hand in hand. It's an interesting concept with writing across the curriculum and being able to communicate what you understand on a deep level. And that combination is almost getting more separated just because of the science of reading. And I think it needs to be brought back together to be part of that process.
Well, first of all, be careful about when we talk about science of reading, because the minute you say science of reading, I mean, boy, I thought the people, when they talk about DOK not being accurate, you talk about the science of reading, it's like, oh, okay, wait, slow down. But I think, to tell you the truth, I think that even like writing across the curriculum, this is, I think, also what happens is that we give a name to a pain. And if you think about it, a lot of times the method or even the framework or even this, like all this stuff that we create this pseudo product, and we point to that product and say that's my pain point, where it's kind of lost the intent and purpose. um, I'll be blunt to say, like, people talk about the Danielson framework, and there's a lot of fingers pointed at the Danielson framework, and if you talk to Charlotte Danielson, she'll tell you that you're all using my framework in a way I never intended. Same with Karen and I with DOK, same with Norman with DOK. And that's why, again, going back to it, is that, do we really understand the intent and purpose of what we're using? And writing across the curriculum sounded like a pain point, because writing along with questioning is probably some of the most uncomfortable thing you can do. And a lot of it comes from our own experiences as students. That, how many times have you heard people go, well, I'm not a writer, or I'm not this? No, we're all communicators. What I try to say is that it's literacy across the curriculum. And when I talk about literacy, literacy is not just reading. And I like the whole idea about purposeful reading, purposeful writing, and purposeful discussion that they call about authentic literacy. And again, that's kind of a simple explanation of it. But like, when you are reading and writing and discussing in one content area, that's different than when you're in another area. It's not just blanket. And that's when we talk about college and career readiness. A lot of the reasons why our kids are struggling is because in college is because they can't communicate what they've learned. My daughter, who goes to Northern Arizona State University, or Northern Arizona University now, she was very appreciative that I had her always tell me how she solved the problem and why they're correct. Because in college, that's what they're doing. It's not what is two plus two. Calculator can tell me that. It's at how can you use addition to find the sum of those two numbers. That's what they're asking in college. That's complex.
Mhm.
And it's really interesting because little kids can do that, but it's complex because now you're retrieving the knowledge and you're processing into language. College is also asking, could two plus two equal five if you use addition, decimals, and rounding? Now I'm mathematically thinking, and that's actually an engineering and computing theory where they talk about the fallacy of rounding. And if you look at computing, they'll say that's why some computers are off in their timing, because they round. And if that's too complex to think about, go into Excel, add 2 plus 2, 2.4 plus 2.3, and get 4.7, copy it over to the next cells, and then go and say round to the nearest number. it'll say 2 + 2 could equal 5.
Yeah,
And that's the world we're living in, Norm. That's the like, why is this worth learning? And that is what our kids are asking. Our kids, a lot of the barriers of what they're learning is because why do I need to learn this when I can just press a button and it'll give me the answer? And
right.
that's that instant gratification. That's, I mean, there's all this brain-based research about the dopamine in the brain, the instant gratification people get is that we've gone from what I call an MTV generation, where everything was in MTV cuts, and we can take the music and the audio and the print and the visual and form this thing, to a social media generation where everything is like online, to an app generation where it's like I have an app with that to cut down my work. And just because you cut down the work, that doesn't mean you understand to the complexity and that it demands.
That's
So
correct.
I compare when people go on AI to determine DOK levels, that's like you basically going on a calculator and saying, okay, let me do this math problem. Okay, I got the answer. Great. Now what?
Right. Bringing up the AI, now that we understand the wheel and how it all came about and the intentions, and even though we didn't mention any states' names, we understand the evolution of that. And now getting into the AI and the misuse of AI, you've already addressed several times in different formats. But my big concern with AI is that it is becoming the go-to resource rather than a tool. And that
Mhm,
resource is inaccurate. It's taking things from all over the web, unless you are very accurate in how you put that in, which
mhm.
you gave the example of. How are you helping teachers understand that process of you can't use AI for everything? You know, that
Right.
they once they get into it, like you said, there are two camps and they just go full go. I'm doing this
Mhm.
for everything. Oh, look, I was right. It is too, but they don't know why. So how are you talking with teachers about that process?
Well, you know what? It's really funny because that actually gets into more of a social, emotional, or affective standpoint with teachers. Because if
Mhm.
teachers are like, look, I'm fine. I will put it to Chat GPT. It did this. It gave me back. Then you get what you get. It's like, do you want a gourmet meal that has been cooked or prepared, or do you want something you can just pop in the microwave and just get it out? What do you want to get out of it? What I'm trying to tell people, ask people is, not tell, but ask people is, what do you want AI to be? Do you want it to be a producer where it makes something for you? And I'll tell you straight right now, I've been doing that a lot with graphics, and AI can't spell. And that's the hallucination. I actually made a graphic about Think Like a Scientist based on Adam Grant, and he talks about the things that prevent us from rethinking are being a preacher, a prosecutor, and a politician. And it's not only did it spell prosecutor wrong, it spelled hypotheses wrong.
Oh,
Okay, now I'm a
jeez.
science teacher that's determining DOK levels of my next generation science standards using a platform that can't even spell hypotheses. So is it a producer? Is it something you wanted to make? Even Canva, I was just trying to do a thing with making a bullseye target about unwrapping standards. And I was very explicit. I said, I want the outer ring to be subject matter, the next ring to be skills, the next ring to be specifics, and the bullseye, I wanted to say standard. It couldn't do it. Okay. That's the problem with it. All right. The other thing is, so I ask people, do you want it to be a provider that it can go out and get you the information you want? Nor full transparency, I'm using AI to help research my book, and I'm using AI to get me the resources. Now, even when I say, get me credible research, resources, and reports from education authors and presenters and such and practitioners, here's one limitation. It's going to get me open free resources. Like if you go on ChatGPT and they say, who are the authorities on depth of knowledge? They're going to say Norman and Karen because they have a lot of open resources out there and they've written journal articles. But they also say like state education agencies and assessments, which we know that they're not doing the DOK accurately. But the other thing is, it gives me back some sources. And I'm like, wow, that's a great source. And I go and look for it because I have to. I
Hmm.
can't just say I got this from the AI. I have to actually read the source
Right.
to cite and synthesize it. And I'll say, where is it? Oh, it doesn't exist. What do you mean it doesn't exist? Why'd you give it to me? Well, you said you want this. I called my AI Hal from 2001: A Space Odyssey. I go, Hal, what the hell are you doing to me? Excuse my language.
You're allowed.
Okay.
We're
I
adults
say
here.
something, I say something even worse than that. Okay. And that's the danger of it. That's the danger of it. What I use it as is I tell people it's a thought partner. If you have PLCs, if you are PLCs, and you have a four team member of your staff, the fifth member should be what the AI you're using. But again, you can't just say because the AI said so
Right.
that that's where we need to go with it. It provides you the input. I think the beauty of AI is that it helps us break down and it helps us organize our thoughts. Like I get writer's block and I doubt myself a lot tremendously when I'm writing, and I don't like what I would say. So I would go to AI and say, how would I say this? And it tells me how I would say it. But Norm, I just don't copy and paste it. I say, what's another way to do it? And then it breaks me through my writer's block. So what if we could use this? Because that's what it's called. I think it's called like a limited language model or something like that. What if we could use this to help kids organize their thoughts? What if we can use this again, going back to the Feynman method? It gave you this. Now summarize and synthesize in your own words. What does that mean? And make sure that you're citing the source, or you can even say AI helped me with
Hmm.
this. But
Right.
again, it's a tool. It's not a resource, it's a tool. And I just wish people would understand that. And even when you have the big companies, look, they're a big company. There's a big company out there that has a thing called the DOK question generator. Number one, it doesn't even generate questions, it generates objectives. Okay. Number two, you say, I ask it, what is your knowledge source? It says, I don't get a specific knowledge source. Another one, they talk about depth of knowledge, and I say, what is the knowledge source? And it tells me it. And I say, do you use the DOK wheel? Absolutely. You know, so here's what I think the future of AI is, and this is what I'm doing with it, and I'll share this. I think for people like you and me, and all the authors out there and the presenters, the future of AI is authenticity. If you want a DOK AI app, I'm actually creating one, and it's based on my work. But what it is that it's a closed AI. What I mean by it is that think of AI like the ocean. Now, most of these platforms we have, they're like nets in the ocean. You can maybe keep out some of the danger, but still there's stuff that's going to get through. This is like a dam. In fact, Norm, this thing was so controlled for anti-hallucinations. And I'm not trying to get tech, I'm not a tech person at all. I just, I'm like, this is like what they call no code. I talk to it. This thing was so tight with its anti-hallucination that when I used it and said, okay, I want to align depth of knowledge with the science of reading with Scarborough's rope, it said, I can't do that. Erik doesn't discuss that in his book. And I'm like, no, this is Erik. I give you permission. I had to actually program it to
Oh,
say,
wow.
you can go out. The other thing I safeguard with it is that it's about my work with depth of knowledge because that's professional respect. If you went into it and said, create me a Hess matrix, it won't. It'll say, that's the copyrighted work of Karen Hess. If you want to go and learn about that, here's the link. And it puts the link up
That's good.
because that's professional respect.
Right.
And
Right.
I think that's something we need to, and that's even a larger conversation, is that you need to cite the source. And that's why I really appreciate you and I respect you tremendously because I know you do training on my work and other people's work, but you cite the source.
I
There's
take
a
the book
lot,
with me.
yeah, and you take, I appreciate that. And that's why, and that's the thing, but I cannot tell you how many people are just taking things because they went on AI or because they saw a slide. I mean, Norm, I'll be fully transparent with you. I had to shut down an offshore company that took my slides for DOK and we're making canvas prints on them
Oh my
and
gosh.
selling it on Amazon I literally had to write and shut them down. And the person was like, oh, oh my gosh, I didn't realize this. I scoured my whole thing. This company was actually taking all the stuff we share on the internet, all us authors and all us posters and everything, and they were making canvas prints and charging like 20, $30 a pop for you to get it. It's like
Wow.
we got to respect the research. We got to really understand the research.
Right.
We really have to be not you're knowledgeable, because what you do is you take everybody's research and you make it your own. That makes it knowledgeable. Okay. I'm knowledgeable in what I do. All the other authors are knowledgeable. But when you go out there and you say, okay, I read this, now I can go and train on it or I can go and teach it. That's like me saying, give me a calculus textbook. I'll read it and then I can teach it.
Right.
That's not
Right.
what it is, you
Yes.
know?
Yeah. Well, it goes back to that teaching. You mentioned it. Teachers are teaching at a high level because they are synthesizing and putting things that are best for their kids, not just all kids. It's this kid in
Right,
particular needs this. And that's exactly
right.
what we try to do when we go into these professional development sessions. I pull from all of the resources that I take in with me and say, this is none of these really fit perfectly, but
Right.
let's work through this and find ones that work for you and how it's going to function in your setting based on research. We're going to go back to that piece. And it is what sets people apart. And I also feel that this is how musicians must have felt when digital came in, when Napster came in.
Mhm.
It's open game. Anybody can take anything. So I guess you're like the rock star of education now.
I want to say that, but actually that was an interesting thing because in the original days of sampling, that the musicians had to go and there's actually an interesting story that Tone Loc on Wild Thing sampled Van Halen's "Jamie's Crying." I got to get a Van Halen reference in there,
Exactly.
and,
Perfect.
and yeah, because for those of you guys who don't know, I'm the biggest Van Halen fan in the world. Um, and Eddie Van Halen went after it and said, "Hey, you sampled my song and you didn't give me credit on it." And that's something I think that we need to make sure we're doing as professionals, but also the integrity of what we're doing. I mean, and this is something, I mean, it's going a little bit deeper and kind of extensive into it, is like who's presenting to you. Norm, when you present, I know you synthesize all the work of all of us who do it, and you create the Norm Potter method.
Hmm.
Okay. And that's an innovation. That's innovative thinking. You're not training on, hey, I read page 56 of Eric's book and I can train on it. There's actually people who do that. They actually, unfortunately, I had to tell Doug Lemma of it. And I said, there's people out there who take a page out of your book, teach like a champion, and then turn it into their own PD. That's no, that's not respectful. Okay. You need to go and cite your sources. I don't ever, and I have people say to me, well, Eric, you didn't invent DOK. You darn right I didn't. I did not invent DOK. Shout it out to the masses. I did not invent DOK. I did something with it. Okay. I have a lot of knowledge. I'm very knowledgeable about it. I didn't just read. This is the reason why I didn't want to go out and say, this is DOK. That's Norman Webb's responsibility. I said, this is what you can do with DOK.
Right.
But when people go out and they use AI and they say, okay, I can do a DOK training for you, or they basically read our stuff and say, okay, I can do the training for you. It's like, are you getting the depth of knowledge, no pun intended, that we need to succeed as teachers? Or is it just good enough? And I think that's the question we need to have for AI. Do you want great quality, or is what you're getting good enough? Do you want to go have a gourmet dinner or put in a box in the microwave because it's good enough? I'll eat. Do you want to get a hamburger from Ruth Chris or a hamburger from McDonald's? Do you want to get a barbecue ribs from a great restaurant that specializes only in barbecue? Or do you want to get the McRib from McDonald's because they'll give it, you
Yeah, which
know?
is not a rib even. It's not even
It's
close.
not even a rib. And
No.
there's a statement, and I'll say it, and I know it's probably going to ruffle some feathers. Um, I call it department store PD, because you can get a general department store like Walmart or Target, and you can buy anything at those places. And there's an associate that will sell it to you.
Hmm.
But what's the quality of the product you're getting and how knowledgeable is that associate? Flip that and replace the product with professional development and the associate being a trainer that, yeah, I can present it to you, but my depth of knowledge is basically based upon what I did. And to tell you the truth, there's kind of sometimes I wonder like why people are writing it. Is it that are you writing it to share? Or are you writing it to say, hey, this is what I know and da 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 da.
Hmm. Right.
And that's a big thing. And that's something that I often question with that. And I know I'm going to ruffle some feathers with it. And I apologize if you're offended. But to tell you the truth, our kids deserve to have the best practices we can give them. Are there great presenters out there? Absolutely. Are there great presenters who have knowledge out there? Sure. But what is the knowledgeability of what they're presenting? What is their depth of knowledge? And most importantly, what did they do with it?
Hmm.
I mean, Norm, you're not out there just going, oh, I'm training on depth of knowledge because I read Eric's book, or I'm training on questioning because I read Eric's book, or I'm training on, all these great authors that, you have turned it into your thing. What are you doing? Don't just say, oh yeah, I could do a training on depth of knowledge. No, I mean, I don't even do that. And I'll be transparent with you. You know who taught me that? I'll give you a perfect lesson. I'll tell you the perfect lesson I learned about it. Rick Wormley, who's a mentor and a friend, called me in. He said, I can't do this gig. Can you cover for me? And you know my stuff, you know how I present, and you know what I do. And I'm like, okay, this is very, very, very early in my PD career. I fell on my face. I flopped. You know why? I'm
Yeah.
not Rick Wormley.
Yeah, exactly. It's not true.
Okay, I'm not Rick Wormley. That's why I even say to people, and people say to me, hey, can you go out and present on my stuff? And I'm like, I can't. Can I do it in my own way? No, you need to have the integrity of my work. Then you need, because I'm not a cover band or a tribute bander.
Right.
I mean, I'll take The Ghost of Tom Joad by Bruce Springsteen and I'll play it like Rage Against the Machine. It's the same thing, but I'll play it in my way. And that is true innovative professional development and consulting. Because I know this is also a thing that a lot of people want to do right now. Like everyone
Hmm.
wants to do what you and I do. And there's even people out there who are like, hey, pay me this and I'll teach you how to do it. Man, it's not that. Why are you doing this? And how could you do it innovatively? How could you make it work and make it better? I don't want you going out there to do DOK based on my book. I want you to take what I wrote in my book and I want you to make it your own. And I want you to write your own book. And I want you to make your own PD. And I want you to establish yourself as somebody because it's not what you cover, it's what you do with what you've learned. And that's,
Right.
I think, a big thing. That's another going back to AI because AI is a tool and AI is not going to teach you how to do it because teaching is not simple. Teaching is complex and
Very much
involved and
so.
extensive. And so is DO.
So I'm going to ask one more question about the AI, and I like your AI work that you're doing in a closed network type situation. Do you feel that is the way to go for schools is to create a closed network of good information for teachers to develop? Obviously you do because that's what you're doing, but do you see that as a marketable piece competing against something like a chat GTP?
Here's and it's really funny because I'm wondering, and I may be planting the seed about it out there, is that the big companies that are right now these big AI platforms that can do everything, it's just a matter of time before the big publishing companies like HMH and Pearson and Harcourt Mifflin that they figure it out, they figure out how to use the AI and they incorporate it into their curricular programs. Showing our age, you and I, the AI will be when we got CD-ROMs and transparencies. We never use them. We never use the workbooks. I mean, I joke around. People go, "Oh yeah, we bought this thing and we got this and we got this." I said, "You already have it." What do you mean we already have it? I said, "Go to every teacher that's been teaching more than 10 to 15 years. Go in their shelves. You'll find the CD-ROMs and the transparencies. They just transferred onto the online platform." I think really the future, and this is what I actually want to try to do with it, with the AI platform, and I invite anyone to contact me about this. What I think is, I think what schools could and should do is go to the sources. And some of the big publishing companies are doing this, but go to the sources. I'll give you an example. If you want a DOK AI app, come to me and I can basically say, what is it you want it to do? And use my work with it, and then create it where you know you have a knowledge source with it. I have some schools where they say, hey, I want the AI to do this, 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 and this. And I say, okay, write it up and tell me what you want it to do. And you tell me, and then you feed it into the AI and say, okay, can you do this and can you tie it to my work? Yes, and it'll do it. I think that's what school districts do. I think school districts should try to figure out and try to base, and I might be shaking the trees on this one. I think because you have a lot of great people inside school districts who really know about AI, and these are the people who go to ISTE, and they often scare us when they come back. With all the, I say that in tongue in cheek in terms of endearment. I think what these schools should try to do is reach out to the authors, reach out to the practitioners. And I think what they should do is contact us and say, hey, we want to do your work and we want your work in there. Can you help us turn it into an AI app that we use in our district? I also think that we're not getting any younger. And I think we've lost the genius of some of our great education authors. I get sad when I see people, who pass away. What are we doing to carry on that knowledge? And what are we doing to carry on a legacy for our children, our grandchildren? I mean, Norm, I travel and God forbid something happens to me in my travel. Maverick education is probably over. Depth of knowledge, what I do with it is probably over. Inquiry and questioning, what I do with it is probably over. But if I have these AI apps, what am I doing that I basically am like kind of like transferring my thinking and my knowledge into it to where it lives on and it's also responsive. Like when I put the DOK stuff in there and it references my book, well, I wrote that book at this certain point in my life, but the world has changed.
Hmm.
So it's almost like you're constantly updating it and it's being responsive. So I made a book study of deconstructing depth of knowledge and inquiring minds want to learn with AI. And what it does is it says to you first, what chapter do you want to discuss? And it says this chapter. And then it says, well, what grade level and subject area do you teach? And you enter it in. And this is, okay, here are the 15 key points of this chapter. Now, what do you want to do? You want to talk about how you can use it in your grade level subject area? Is there a topic you want to delve deeper? Do you want to plan something with it? Do you want to do a role play situation? See, that's going to be the future, I think, of also book studies.
Interesting. I like that, and I think it's manageable for students, for teachers to be able to handle that. And as you're
Hmm.
talking, I had so many thoughts going through my head. Um, One is, as a former middle school history teacher, I would love to have an AI that only focuses on primary documents written in American history, and then
Hmm.
have things that would be developed through that, because that would give a clearer picture of what people were thinking at those times. That's one thing I thought of. I thought that would be a very nice closed network of AI. Um, that was one. Go ahead.
No, well, here's the thing is, so knowing you're a history teacher, so I want to ask you this. What do you think about these AIs that say, hey, we program the AI so it's like you're talking to a person in history? Because, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, again, because you're taking from all these other sources,
Uh-huh.
it's just not realistic. It's
You,
it's it could be somebody else's jaded thought on what Abraham Lincoln should have said. It's out
right.
there. It's not the
Oh,
same.
I even ask this. No one will let me do it. I know teachers who have it, and I go, "Do you have Thomas Jefferson?" They go, "Good, good." I want to go and ask it. What does he mean by all men were created equal? And it's like, what's it going to say to me?
Right.
And it's
Yes.
funny, pop culture is there was a Fantastic Four comic where they went back in time, and Reed Richards' son, he said to him, he goes, "This is your chance to ask Thomas Jefferson questions." And he said, "What did you ask him?" He said, "I asked him, what does he mean by all men are created equal?" And he said, what did he say? He goes, nothing I really could understand or make sense of.
Hmm.
And I'm like, wow, that's powerful.
Yes.
Because it's like, what was the thinking at that time period? AI can't capture that.
Right.
And I think it's a disservice. And it's dangerous. I mean, I don't know if you saw the new thing. This just came out yesterday. Someone went into an offshore AI platform and they created a 5 minute clip of Brad Pitt and Tom Cruise fighting martial arts in a post-apocalyptic world. It's their voice, it's their mannerisms. You would think it was really them.
Hmm.
And everyone right now, as I talk about this, next week it might be a different thing when you air this, but everyone right now in Hollywood is just like this. We're done. We're over. Because here's the thing is go look it up. It's called Brad Pitt fights Tom Cruise, and it's this AI, and it looks so real, and you even hear it. And I'm not even going to say what they were fighting over because if you listen to it, you're like, oh my gosh. And that's the whole thing, even about bias with it, because the reason why Brad Pitt was fighting Tom Cruise in this clip is pretty controversial, and I'm not even going to get into it. But that's the future we're going into, is that the best computer is right here in your head, your brain. Your brain is going to be able to think critically and think creatively and be more conclusive than AI ever will. AI is a microwave that you're asking people to make gourmet meals with. And can you make the meal? Yeah, but it's not going to be that quality,
No. No.
you know?
Yeah. I think there's a place for it without a doubt in education. I don't think it's an all or nothing thing like you said earlier, those two camps. There's ways to use it responsibly. There's ways to use it effectively and efficiently. And
Mhm.
I think it's that, hey, we have a new tool. Let's try to figure out the best way to use this to better our teaching and our learning processes. And
Right.
that's, I think it's easy to just say, let that do it and let it go. And it's just not going to be the same. So,
But it's also the tiered AI with it because now if you want quality AI, you have to pay big money.
right,
You have to pay a monthly subscription. I mean, you can get the open AI of ChatGPT or Claude or even Gemini, but if you really wanted to do greater things, you have to pay for it. So now are we going to create this society who has general AI and more advanced AI? And I mean, it's kind of like I worry about this about even like our reading rates because I just heard that Sesame Street because and people tell me all the time the kids are not watching Sesame Street, which I think is just sad. Okay. But Sesame Street is supposedly moving to paid television.
hmm,
So now are we going to have this whole thing of where literacy is going to be based upon whether you can afford it, much like AI. Like I can go on Gemini, I can go on these open AIs, I can get whatever I want. And then I get the closed AI or I get the subscription AI. I mean, it's so funny, Norm, because when I go on general AI and I talk about DOK, they don't name me unless I ask it because I'm not open resource. And that's where AI starts. My AI will mention me and I go, why are you mentioning me? Is it because, and they'll say, because based upon past interactions, I know you want to talk about how you use AI, how you use DOK, excuse me. And I'm like, you're a pleaser. You're a dog.
right.
Your dog wants to please you.
Yes.
But as much as it train it, it's gonna urinate or defecate on your carpet.
Yep. Well, they always start off every AI. That's a great idea. Let's expand on that. They suck you in right away. It's a good way of looking at it. I love the analogy. I'm going to wrap this up by asking you. You referenced a few times. You have a new book coming out.
Mhm.
What's it about, and when can we expect it to be out?
Well, I'll tell you, that's a good question.
Does AI have
What
the
I'm
answer to
working
that
on
one?
is I'm trying to rethink how we understand and use standards. That we've been the traditional process of unwrapping the standard to circle verbs and underline nouns. Again, that's cursory. People don't realize there's actually was a deeper step we're supposed to take. So there's also a lot of confusion about what is the difference between unwrapping a standard, deconstructing a standard, dissecting a standard, and unpacking a standard. So what I'm trying to do is take a very simple yet surgical approach to it. The question is going to be, how do you unwrap, deconstruct, dissect, and unpack standards to prioritize, plan, align, repurpose, and provide teaching and learning? So the idea is that really trying to get, and people always say to me, Eric, you're all about semantics. I said, no, I'm about specifics. I really think teaching and learning is surgical. It is not a broadsword. It requires a scalpel. Is that if we just do blanket things, we're not going to get to it. And it's really funny, Norm. I learned that because I had a colleague where she had some physical ailments and she showed me, you see that little thing? It's the size of a pinhead in my body, and that's what's throwing it all off. So we really need to get surgical with teaching. And I believe strongly that teachers have the ability to it. And I believe actually that would make teaching fun for me as a PD provider, because my learners are all adults. And if people, and you know this, if people think teaching adults is easier than teaching kids, like Judas Priest said, you got another thing coming.
Yeah. Yeah.
But what I love about training and teaching and why I continue to do it, despite all the walls sometimes I get and the resistance I get is that I'm always trying to figure out a way how you can get this surgical. And I'm not just getting surgical with your cognition, I'm getting surgical with your emotions to say, why are you struggling with this? It might not be a cognitive thing, emotional. So I know I went a little bit more, but that's basically the gist of my next book is going to be really rethinking standards and really revisiting what were the intent and purpose of standards, because I think we've lost sight of what they are. And I've written the introduction and I talk about um, the way it's been, and I talk about how we got here, but I also have this thing where I say the reason to rethink. And I share all the feedback. I don't tell who, but in a general standpoint, all the feedback I've gotten and pushback I've gotten when it comes to the standards. And that's what made me want to write this book is that I'm like, because I say, okay, we're going to deconstruct the standards. Well, we already did that. What do you mean? We unwrapped the standards. No, this is deconstructing the standards. Well, we're good. Then you go to the administration. Hey, I need your help with this because they're saying they already deconstruct the standards, but they really did was unwrap the standards. Well, yeah, they did. And they unpacked the standards too, because the state gave us this document. And I'm like, now we're playing who's on first.
Right.
So let's just clarify it. What does it mean to unwrap to know the skills, stuff, and specifics, deconstruct to determine the rigor, dissect to say how many objectives they have to hit, and unpack to say what do they need to know, understand. And once I got that, let's prioritize what's essential, important, nice to know, or where to go, where you want to go. Let's plan it for by a quarter. Let's check the alignment because that's huge
Yes.
and repurpose it to say, okay, let's just not rephrase standards, but let's repurpose them as questions because they're understandable. And then that whole thing I told you about with the why,
Hmm.
how can you start teaching and learning with plan, how provide instruction with standards. The standards, the why, but also your autonomy and flexibility and why you want to teach it is the why. How you do it is your instruction. What are you teaching and learning? That's what you're doing. So in a
Well,
nutshell, that's the next.
I was gonna say that's a book of about 1,000 pages if you go into great detail because that's a lot of information you're covering.
Well, that's the struggle too, because I'm trying to make it a playbook and a workbook. I
Uh-huh.
mean, the way I look at it is I have enough books I've written thick. My whole thing with this book is basically I'm taking the Motown method of songwriting. Don't bore us, get to the chorus.
Right.
And because that's true, every Motown song starts with a chorus. I just want a book where someone who is whatever your expertise is, whether you are someone who's been teaching with standards for decades, or you're in your teacher prep program and you get this workbook to learn, or you're retire, rehire, or you come from a different, field and you say you have to teach the standards. Well, how am I supposed to do that? Here's this book.
Yeah.
And it's going to be a bunch of things you fill out. I really want to make this more of a playbook and a workbook
Very
than
good. Well, be on the lookout for Eric's book, date to be determined at this point. Uh, I guess it just depends on how much time you have on your hands and if you don't get writer's block. So that could be a long time off, but it's part of the process. I want to
Yeah.
thank you for coming today. Thank you for reaching out. I think that your work is something that everybody needs to hear and study and make sure they understand. to be better teachers. And I do appreciate everything you do across the world, really, to make this a better learning environment for everybody. So thank you, Eric. I do appreciate that.
Thank you, Norm. Thank you for always providing me a platform and looking for the future. I really hope we're going to move forward. A lot of us have had a hard year this year, for we can even say the funding freeze that happened and it threw
Yes.
off everybody. Okay. Don't let money be a reason why we don't do something to support these kids that basically, excuse me, that basically we need to do something. And we need to also recapture the joy of teaching and stop being so stressed out. Try to find that joy in what you do. And also, look, there's nothing wrong with making it fun for you too.
No.
You know,
Uh, That's why I started that free PD session that I post all the time in Michigan. It's at a brewery. You can't beat it. They bring in the drinks and the coffee and the food as I'm talking, and everybody's having a good time. And usually they hang out afterwards and we just sit around and talk even more. And this next one, we have a live musician coming in after me. So it's a great little situation. It brings joy to the people that are there. It's fun, and I'm giving back to the place that started my teaching career. So it's about the balance of understanding and enjoying. I love that.
and that's kudos to you, and that shows your character. The fact that you want to give back, and that's the thing. And then sometimes I think sometimes people get into this for the wrong reasons. Can you make a lot of money? Sure. Can you go? Are you going to go a lot of places? Sure. Are you going to be named to the list like you? Great. That's not why you do it.
No.
You know, I mean, to quote Forrest Gump, I went to the White House again and I met the president again. What I mean by that is really think about why you're doing this, and yeah, there's a lot of things, but it's not an escape. It's not, you know, it's not something that you aspire to. It's something that kind of falls into your lap and gets into it because if you look at it as like you want your out, you want this, it's now also not about you. And sometimes, Norm, I wish people would understand that. Like when I come and do training, I don't want you to teach like me, and I don't want you to be like me. I'm going to give you some stuff, but I want you to be the best that you are. And that's what makes the best coaches. I was just talking to someone like that. I wish there were more coaches like Phil Jackson who could bring out the best in Michael Jordan, or Bill Belichick who can bring out the best in Tom Brady. These guys are already great. They just had great coaches that they didn't say play like me or teach like me. They said, you're already great. Let me help you find a way to get better.
Without a doubt. And that's my why fits in perfectly with that. With kindness, help people find their solutions. It's not about me. I'm just here as a vessel to help guide you, do whatever you need me to do to help you reach your solutions. That's the goal.
Well, I'm also rethinking the whole why thing because there's a lot of stuff coming out right now where they talk about the why has become imposed and it's not motivational anymore. It's mandatory. Like how many times teachers are like, this is really not a great situation. And they're being told, remember your why. Maybe you need to discover your why.
Right.
If I went try fall back on my why, I'd probably leave. So the other book by Simon Sinek, which is The Infinite Game, which I'm trying to draw upon a lot lately, is that he talks about your just cause.
Hmm.
And the just cause is what do you want for others? And what are you willing to do for others? And I think that's the thing. If we stop doing this whole remember your why, discover your why, find your why, it's great, but your why is your own. What do you want for others? Like I used to think my why was actually my just cause because I don't walk around everyday living to ensure teaching and learning is standards driven and student supportive. Okay. But my just cause is here's what I want for you and I'm willing to do for you. I want your teaching and learning to be standards driven, student supportive. Will you join me? No. Okay. Well, what I want basic for you and be willing to do for you is to make sure that all kids rise to, reach, and exceed the standards. Yeah, I can get behind that. Okay. I also want for you for have all students recognize, reach, and realize their potential. Yeah, I can get behind that. That's different than the why.
Hmm.
And it's really interesting as well because I use Superman as an analogy. Superman's why used to be truth, just to fight for truth, justice, and American way. And people laughed at that. And people can't get behind that now. But now what he says is to fight for truth, justice, and a better tomorrow. I can get behind that. That's not my why. If he believes that about the American way, that's on him. And that's his why. It's for him to know and you to find out. But a just cause to say to fight for truth, justice, and a better tomorrow, I can get behind that. So what if we did that? What if we basically said to convey to people, this is what I want to do and what I'm willing to do for you. Help me help you, to quote Jerry Maguire. Because I had to put a Tom Cruise reference in
I
there.
was going to say, you have enlightened us with educational references, rock and roll references, movie references, cartoon references. You've covered the gamut. So I again thank you, Erik, for your enlightening talk and depth of knowledge on the topic. And for everybody watching, as always, be kind, be professional, and find solutions. Thank you very much, Erik.
Thank you.